Imagine standing in the heart of Glasgow in the year 1861. The streets are crowded, thousands have gathered, some cheering, some jeering, some even selling food and drink. But they're not here for a festival, nor a market. They're here to watch a man die. This is the story of Joseph Burns, the last man to face a public execution in Glasgow, an event that would shock the city and mark the end of a brutal tradition. Before we begin, if you love uncovering hidden dramatic moments from history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with your thoughts. It really helps us bring you more stories like this one. Glasgow was booming. The River Clyde bustled with ships, factories belched smoke, and workers crowded into tenements. But with industrial growth came poverty, crime, and desperation. Alcohol was cheap, tempers flared, and violence was never far away. It was in this restless city that Joseph Burns, a 30-year-old Irishman, made his home. He worked laboring jobs, drank heavily, and often clashed with others. His fate would collide tragically with a man named James McPherson, a foreman who would become his victim. On the night of July 5, 1861, Burns got into a heated argument with McPherson. Accounts say both men had been drinking, and insults quickly turned into threats. In a fit of rage, Burns pulled a knife and struck McPherson. The wound was deep, and McPherson collapsed, bleeding to death. Whether it was drunken impulse or malicious intent, the law made little distinction. Burns was arrested, and within days, he was facing the full weight of justice. The trial of Joseph Burns began in September 1861 at the Glasgow Circuit Court. The evidence was damning. Witnesses testified to the quarrel, the stabbing, and Burns' drunken fury. His defense argued that it was not premeditated murder, but a crime of passion. The jury, however, returned a verdict of guilty of murder. The judge then passed the ultimate sentence: death by hanging. At that moment, Burns's life was measured in weeks. In 19th century Britain, executions were not hidden inside prison walls. They were public events, grim spectacles meant to deter crime. But in reality, they often drew huge crowds who treated them like theater. On the morning of September 25, 1861, Glasgow's Saltmarket was packed. Men, women, and children pushed against barriers to get a glimpse of the scaffold erected outside the High Court prison. Some came to jeer, others out of morbid curiosity. Vendors sold pies, fruit, and drinks as though it were a fair. For Joseph Burns, this was the end. He was led from his cell, pale and trembling, but resigned to his fate. At his side was the executioner, William Calcraft, notorious across Britain for his grim trade. As Burns mounted the scaffold, silence swept over the crowd. He was asked if he had final words, but his voice faltered. The noose was placed around his neck, the cap pulled over his face. A moment later, the trapdoor dropped. Joseph Burns died before thousands of watching eyes. Some gasped, others cheered, children laughed. For many in Glasgow, this sight was disturbing, not just the execution itself, but the carnival-like atmosphere surrounding it. The execution of Joseph Burns sparked outrage. Newspapers criticized the spectacle, calling it barbaric and unfit for a modern city. Reformers argued that public hangings did not deter crime, but instead encouraged bloodlust. Because of this, Burns became part of history, the last man ever to be publicly executed in Glasgow. Soon after, the law changed. By the mid-1860s, executions were moved behind prison walls, carried out in secrecy. No longer would the gallows be entertainment for the masses. Joseph Burns's crime was brutal, his punishment final. But his death marked more than just the end of one man's life. It was the turning point that ended Glasgow's era of public executions forever. The last spectacle, the last scaffold, the last noose seen by thousands. The story of Joseph Burns remains a grim reminder of how society once used death as a form of public theater, and how his hanging closed that chapter in history. The past never dies. It only waits to be told.